Melbourne, a city known for its vibrant culture, bustling nightlife, and fireworks that light up the sky on New Year's Eve, was preparing for a night of celebration. Streets were filled with excited revelers, friends, and families, all ready to ring in the new year. The air was thick with anticipation as crowds gathered, eager for the moment the clock would strike midnight and usher in a fresh beginning. It was a night of celebration, joy, and fireworks, the perfect way to end one year and start another. But as the city buzzed with the energy of new beginnings, something horrifying was about to unfold in the heart of the city. What should have been a night of merriment and cheers quickly turned into a scene of terror. Just moments before midnight, as the crowd braced for the fireworks display, two young men were suddenly caught in a brutal and unprovoked attack that would change their lives forever. They were not targeted by any personal grievance or dispute. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. A group of machete-wielding assailants emerged from the shadows, intent on causing chaos and destruction. In a flash, the street that had been alive with excitement became a scene of unimaginable violence. This is the story of that attack, a shocking and brutal ambush that rocked the city to its core, leaving not only the victims, but also the entire community in a state of fear and disbelief. A celebration of new beginnings turned into a night of terror, leaving many to wonder how something so violent could unfold in a place so vibrant and full of life. Before we dive into the details of this horrifying crime, make sure to subscribe to Real Crime Saga so you don't miss any of our in-depth storytelling on real-life crime cases. We'll bring you the shocking truth behind the crime stories that unfold in cities across the world. Let's explore what happened on that fateful night and how two young men became victims of an unprovoked, terrifying attack. Stay tuned as we break down every chilling moment of this crime. It was just minutes before the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve. The streets of Melbourne were buzzing with excitement. The city had come alive, with thousands of people pouring into the city center, eager to celebrate the arrival of the new year. It was a night filled with anticipation, joy, and the promise of new beginnings. The sounds of laughter, music, and conversations filled the air, as people from all walks of life came together to mark the occasion. Among the throngs of excited revelers were two young men, a 20-year-old from Heidelberg West and an 18-year-old visiting from New South Wales. For them, it was supposed to be an unforgettable night, one spent with friends, enjoying the festivities, and watching the fireworks that would light up the sky at midnight. They were walking along Ligon Street, a well-known strip in Melbourne celebrated for its bustling restaurants, cafes, and vibrant nightlife. The energy in the air was contagious, the street full of life. The young men, caught in the infectious joy of the moment, had no idea that their evening would soon take a drastic and violent turn. Without warning, the atmosphere shifted in a way no one could have predicted. From the shadows, a group of 7 men, their faces obscured by masks, appeared on the busy street. They were armed, wielding machetes and knives, tools of destruction. The men moved with an unsettling calmness, a sense of intent in their step as they made their way toward the two unsuspecting victims. It was as though they had appeared out of nowhere, their presence a stark contrast to the jubilant celebration surrounding them. In an instant, everything changed. The attackers descended on the two young men with terrifying speed and precision. The assailants didn't hesitate. They didn't stop to ask questions or demand anything from their victims. There was no robbery, no argument, just a vicious, unprovoked assault. The young men, caught completely off guard, had no time to react or flee. They were at the mercy of a group bent on inflicting harm. As the assailant struck, the surrounding crowd watched in horror. The chaos that erupted on the once festive street was impossible to ignore. In seconds, what should have been a night of celebration became a scene of pure terror. The young men had become targets for no reason other than the violent desires of a group determined to cause fear and destruction. This wasn't just a random act. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated attack, designed to hurt, to terrorize, and to leave its victims scarred, physically and emotionally. What started as a night full of promise had been reduced to chaos, as the two men found themselves fighting for their lives on the very streets that were meant to bring joy. The violence unfolded with such shocking speed that neither of the victims had a chance to fully comprehend what was happening. One moment, The two young men were walking along the vibrant Ligon Street, enjoying the celebrations. The next, they were plunged into a nightmare, struck without warning by a group of machete-wielding attackers who descended on them like a storm. The assailants, with ruthless aggression, slashed at their victims with precision. Machetes and knives flashed in the dim streetlight, causing deep, vicious cuts to the young men's bodies. There was no mercy in the blows. The first victim, unable to fully process the shock of what was happening, tried to escape. His survival instinct kicked in, and he bolted toward the nearest shelter, a nearby juice bar. But his legs betrayed him. His injuries were too severe. He didn't make it far before he collapsed in front of the entrance, blood spilling onto the pavement as his body crumpled in agony. The second victim, equally injured and stumbling from the shock, tried to escape as well. With every step, the pain of his wounds intensified, but he managed to stagger toward a nearby bar, desperately seeking refuge inside. The once bustling street, filled with excitement just moments before, had turned into a war zone. The two young men, caught in this brutal act of violence, were struggling to stay conscious, their lives hanging in the balance. As quickly as the attack began, it ended. The assailants, their mission completed, disappeared into the night. They vanished without a trace, leaving the two victims alone in their suffering. The crowd that had once been celebrating around them was now in disarray. What was once a joyful evening of festivities had been replaced with horror, as those nearby stood frozen in shock. Bystanders, many still in disbelief, rushed to the victim's aid. Some tried to stop the bleeding, pressing their hands onto the wounds in a desperate attempt to save their lives. Others were frantically calling for emergency services, hoping for help, praying that it wasn't too late. It was a horrifying sight. Two young men, their futures uncertain, lying in a pool of their own blood on the very street that had once been filled with laughter and celebration. Emergency responders arrived soon after, but the damage had already been done. The victims were rushed to the hospital, their conditions critical. But for those who had witnessed the attack, the trauma was far from over. It was an experience none of them had ever expected on what was supposed to be a night of joy. The brutality of the attack had stripped away the festivities and replaced them with something far darker, a stark reminder of how quickly violence can shatter a peaceful moment. What was meant to be a night of celebration had turned into a night of terror. The victims' lives had been forever altered in those few minutes, and the ripples of the attack would be felt for a long time to come. As the two young men lay on the ground, blood pooling around them from the multiple machete wounds they had suffered, the once festive Ligon Street became a scene of utter chaos. Their bodies were a testament to the brutality of the attack. Their breaths were shallow, their limbs weak, but the fight for survival was far from over. The excitement that had filled the air moments ago was replaced with the unbearable tension of a city gripped by disbelief and fear. Within minutes of the attack, emergency services were called to the scene. Paramedics arrived quickly, responding to the horror unfolding on one of Melbourne's busiest streets. They worked with urgency, assessing the victims' critical condition, stabilizing them as best they could under the harrowing circumstances. The severity of the injuries was apparent: deep slashes, cuts, and wounds that would take more than just medical intervention to heal. Both victims were immediately rushed to the Royal Melbourne Hospital, their chances of survival uncertain as they were whisked away in an ambulance. It was a race against time. The streets, which had just moments ago been alive with the cheers of people welcoming the new year, now echoed only with the sounds of sirens and the quiet murmurs of shock-stricken onlookers. Witnesses, many still in shock, stood frozen as the paramedics worked, unable to grasp what had just unfolded before their eyes. The festive energy of the evening had vanished entirely, replaced by the weight of a tragedy no one had seen coming. But while the victims fought for their lives in the hospital, the perpetrators were already gone. The attackers, having committed their brutal assault, had disappeared into the night without a trace. The group had vanished, blending into the darkness, leaving no clues behind to follow. No one knew where they had gone or who they were. In the minutes it took for the paramedics to arrive, the assailants were long gone. It was as if they had been ghosts, their presence on Ligon Street nothing more than a fleeting moment of terror. With little evidence to go on and no immediate suspects, Victoria Police launched a manhunt. They were determined to track down those responsible for such a senseless attack, but the case proved difficult. The attackers had carefully planned their assault, leaving nothing behind to point directly to them. The only clues were the few frantic witnesses and the CCTV footage that might offer a glimpse of the perpetrators. But even that was limited. As the investigation began, the area surrounding Ligon Street became a crime scene. The joy that had once filled the air was now replaced with somber silence as police cordoned off the area. The once celebratory atmosphere turned to one of shock and disbelief. People who had been out celebrating just moments ago were now trying to make sense of what had just occurred. How could such an atrocity happen in the middle of one of Melbourne's most iconic streets, on one of the most joyous nights of the year? For the victims, their night of celebration had quickly turned into a fight for survival. And for the city of Melbourne, the questions of why and how would linger long after the sirens faded away. The attack on Ligon Street not only shattered the lives of the two victims, but also sent shockwaves rippling through the entire Melbourne community. What was once a street synonymous with laughter, joy, and vibrant nightlife quickly became the scene of a violent crime that no one could have anticipated. Ligon Street, with its bustling restaurants, crowded cafes, and colorful energy, was now marred by bloodshed. The festive mood that had permeated the area moments earlier vanished, replaced by a chilling silence. For local business owners, the effect was immediate and profound. Many had been serving customers, welcoming the new year with good food, music, and conversation. But in the aftermath of the attack, everything changed. The once thriving street became eerily quiet as businesses closed their doors early, unable or unwilling to continue operating in the wake of such a horrifying event. The sounds of clinking glasses and happy conversations were replaced by the drone of police sirens, and the festive air was now tainted by fear and uncertainty. Even the loyal patrons who had come to enjoy the night were left in disbelief. Some had witnessed the attack firsthand, unable to fathom what had just unfolded before their eyes. For those who had been oblivious to the danger moments before, the violence was too much to process. The street, which should have been filled with the sounds of celebration as the new year began, had turned into a scene of horror and confusion. For the residents of Melbourne, this attack raised troubling questions that no one seemed to have answers to. How could such violence erupt in the middle of one of the busiest streets, on a night that was meant to bring people together? Ligon Street was a well-known hub for nightlife, and yet, in an instant, it had transformed from a symbol of celebration to a grim reminder of how quickly safety can be shattered. How could anyone have seen this coming, especially when the victims were simply two young men enjoying the night like countless others? As the night wore on, the entire city seemed to feel the impact of what had transpired. The usual sense of security that people had walking the streets of Melbourne, one of Australia's most iconic cities, was replaced by a cloud of fear. People began to question their safety. They wondered how long it would take before something like this happened again. Could the streets still be trusted? Was it safe to celebrate in public spaces anymore? Even as the city continued its New Year celebrations, the events on Ligon Street loomed large in everyone's mind. The aftermath of the attack didn't just affect the two victims. It was felt across Melbourne. The attack on one of the city's busiest streets, on one of the most anticipated nights of the year, sent ripples of fear and confusion through the community. People were left shaken, uncertain of the future. What should have been a time of joy, new beginnings, and unity had been marred by terror. And for the residents, the question remained: if this could happen here, on a night like this, where else could it happen? The night was forever changed, and so was Melbourne. What once felt like a safe, bustling city now carried a heavy, unsettling weight. A city grappling with the brutal reality that no one is truly safe, not even during the most celebrated moments. As soon as the authorities were alerted to the brutal attack, Victoria Police wasted no time in responding. Their swift actions were crucial, as the city was reeling from the shock of what had just happened. The attack on Ligon Street was violent, unpredictable, and left two young men fighting for their lives. With the assailant still on the run, the need for an immediate and thorough investigation was clear. A large-scale investigation was quickly launched to find those responsible for the savage crime. Detectives worked around the clock, following every possible lead, interviewing witnesses, and gathering as much evidence as possible. They painstakingly sifted through hours of CCTV footage from the area, hoping it would offer a glimpse of the attackers or provide any detail that might point to their identities. But despite their best efforts, the footage provided little help. The attackers had vanished into the night, blending in with the crowd, leaving no trace behind. The uncertainty surrounding the attackers only added to the fear and frustration. Without clear evidence or leads, the investigation became more challenging by the day. The police had little to go on, with most witnesses unable to provide detailed descriptions of the attackers. Some reported seeing figures with masks or hoodies, but the rush of events left many unsure of even the smallest details. The group had struck quickly, and in those crucial moments, they made sure to cover their tracks. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this attack wasn't an isolated incident. In fact, it was part of a disturbing pattern of rising machete and knife-related violence across Melbourne. Over the past year, there had been a significant increase in violent clashes involving youth gangs armed with dangerous weapons. These gangs, often operating with a sense of anonymity and impunity, had been responsible for a number of violent attacks in public spaces, attacks that left residents terrified and questioning their safety. The attack on Ligon Street only heightened these fears. What had once been a rare occurrence was now becoming a troubling trend. Law enforcement was on high alert, but the sheer volume of knife and machete-related incidents across the city was overwhelming. The police were committed to finding the perpetrators, but the lack of clear leads made the task seem daunting. For Melbourne residents, the rise in youth gang violence and machete attacks left them questioning their safety in public spaces. The streets that were once filled with people enjoying the city's nightlife now seemed like battlegrounds. The fear that something like this could happen again hung heavily over the community. Despite the challenges, the police remained determined to bring those responsible for the Ligon Street attack to justice. The city had been rocked by the brutality of crime, and law enforcement knew that solving this case was crucial not only for the victims and their families, but for the entire community. However, with few leads and no immediate suspects, the investigation was far from easy. The search for answers continued, but as time passed, the uncertainty only grew. The machete attack on New Year's Eve was not an isolated event, but rather part of a disturbing and escalating pattern of knife and machete-related violence in Melbourne. Over the past several months, the city had witnessed a troubling rise in violent incidents involving gangs and individuals armed with large knives, machetes, and other dangerous weapons. These attacks were often swift, brutal, and seemingly random, with no warning or provocation. In many cases, innocent people found themselves caught in the crossfire, victims of violence they never saw coming. The attack on Ligon Street, which took place in the middle of one of Melbourne's most popular and lively areas, was a stark reminder that no place in the city was safe from this growing epidemic of violence. What had once been a festive night of celebration quickly turned into a scene of terror. But this incident was far from unique. In fact, it was merely the latest in a series of increasingly violent encounters that had plagued Melbourne streets. For many in the community, the rise in knife and machete violence was deeply concerning. Public spaces, which were once considered safe havens for socializing, dining, and celebrating, had now become battlegrounds. No one felt entirely secure walking through the streets, not knowing when or where the next attack might occur. The unsettling reality that anyone could become a victim at any moment left many residents on edge, unable to shake the fear that their neighborhood could be the next target. As youth violence and gang activity surged, Melbourne's public safety was put at risk. Young people, often armed with large, dangerous knives or machetes, engaged in violent clashes that seemed to erupt out of nowhere. These gangs, some operating in packs, targeted random individuals with no clear motive other than to cause harm. The violence was unpredictable, making it difficult for law enforcement to prevent or stop these incidents before they happened. In response to the rising violence, Victoria Police stepped up their efforts to combat knife crime. They introduced stricter laws aimed at cracking down on the possession of dangerous weapons, including machetes, knives, and other blades. Increased patrols in known hotspots, as well as targeted raids, were part of a broader strategy to reduce the number of weapons on the streets. These efforts were aimed at both addressing the immediate violence and preventing further incidents before they could escalate. Despite these measures, the fear and uncertainty within the community remained. The police's efforts, while crucial, seemed insufficient in the face of such widespread violence. People began to question how many more attacks would have to occur before the situation was brought under control. How many more innocent lives would be affected before the cycle of violence was broken? And even with heightened enforcement, could the streets ever feel truly safe again? For many, the fear of being caught in the next attack overshadowed their everyday lives. The once thriving neighborhoods, with bustling restaurants and busy streets, had transformed into areas where anxiety lingered in the air. Everyone was left wondering, how long would this surge in violence continue, and what would it take for the city to regain its sense of security? As the investigation into the New Year's Eve Machete attack continues, the two victims, who once walked the streets of Melbourne full of hope and excitement, are now left to grapple with the aftermath of a brutal assault. Their lives, forever altered by the violence, have become a testament to the terrifying reality of life in a city where no one can predict when or where the next attack will strike. While both victims are fighting for their survival, their recovery will be long and difficult, with scars, both physical and emotional, that may never fully heal. What was meant to be a night of celebration has instead become a grim reminder of the dangers that lurk in the streets. Melbourne, a city once known for its cultural vibrancy and festive energy, now finds itself struggling to understand how something so horrific could happen in broad daylight. The attack on Ligon Street is not just a tragedy for the two young men, it is a wake-up call for the entire city. This violent act is far from an isolated incident. It is part of a larger, much more troubling pattern that has taken root in Melbourne. The rise in gang violence and machete-related attacks has created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, one that permeates the streets and affects every resident. This is no longer a problem confined to a few isolated incidents. This is a systemic issue, one that is taking a heavy toll on the community at large. For the city of Melbourne, this attack is a painful reflection of the deeper issues at play. The rise of youth gang violence, fueled by the easy access to dangerous weapons like machetes and knives, has left many questioning whether the authorities can regain control. The question on everyone's mind is whether the violence will subside or if the city will continue to grapple with the unpredictable eruptions of terror that have become all too common in recent months. As the police continue their search for the attackers, the victims and their families are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. For the victims, it's a fight for survival. For the families, it's a journey through unimaginable grief and confusion. Meanwhile, Melbourne itself is left to confront the devastating impact of this horrific crime. The ripple effect of the attack, felt by those directly involved and by the community at large, is something that will linger long after the investigation concludes. This may have been a New Year's Eve attack, but its consequences will be felt for years to come. The fear, the uncertainty, and the trauma will leave a lasting imprint on the city, reshaping how people view their safety in public spaces. The scars of that night will remain, not just for the victims, but for the entire city that witnessed the brutal reality of unchecked violence. Thank you for following along with this gripping story. If you found this case as chilling and thought-provoking as we have, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. Stay safe, and remember, the fight for justice continues long after the headlines fade.